Another week, another lawsuit that Colorado is joining against the Trump administration. Denver Public Schools also filed a lawsuit against the administration this week. And a judge in Colorado Springs has told the city to redo its plans to get a measure on the ballot in April. We certainly are in litigious times. And isn't this week supposed to be about love and harmony? Let's get to the heart of it all on this week's Colorado Inside Out. Hello, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. I am Kyle Dyer. Let me get right to introducing you to this week's Insider Panel. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward; Alton Dillard, political analyst and media and public affairs consultant with the Dillard Group, and former election spokesperson for the city and county of Denver; Sage Nauman, conservative columnist, commentator, and strategist, and owner of Anthem Communications; and Alvina Vasquez, an advocacy leader here in Denver and member of the PBS 12 Community Advisory Board. In the last 3 weeks since Inauguration Day, Colorado has joined in on 4 lawsuits against the Trump administration, the most recent suit being to halt the stop in funding to NIH, which will have a drastic impact on research taking place here in Colorado. And then on Wednesday this week, Denver Public Schools filed a lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security and a restraining order to keep ICE agents off school grounds. Another busy week. Patty, I'll start with you.
So busy that yesterday I went to get another cup of coffee and I came back from the kitchen and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had been approved by the Senate. You can't take your eyes off things for a second or you're going to miss yet another horror. Wednesday was a really interesting move by Denver Public Schools, although we have yet to actually hear that ICE has gone into a school. I applaud them for taking that proactive stance. You want kids to be able to get an education despite all the craziness that's out there. We do know during the first raids that there were ICE or federal vehicles went by school buses had to take detours, but there's been no evidence yet that they're going into schools. Still, I like that preemptive strike. Phil Weiser is one of the busiest men in town because he keeps needing to file these suits, and you don't know what judge will do something next, who will be overturned. You know, one of the fascinating ones is the birthright issue, and our own John Eastman, who got us in so much trouble when he was at CU and then worked to defend Trump on the January 6th issue, he supposedly is leading some of the charge against the birthright issue. Oh. So it's going to be endless.
Okay. Alton.
Yes, to your threshold question, are we in a litigious era? Yes, we are. My goodness. Because one of the things I'm looking at locally is the effect of these cuts on the medical research. You know, a lot of our universities are really big players in that space. And I understand that, you know, the Trump administration believes they have a quote unquote mandate. And yes, there are ways to ferret out waste in government, but you don't do it on the backs of the federal employees, and you definitely don't do it on the back of research facilities. Briefly on the Doge and Treasury issue, that's yet another one of the things that's in litigation. And this is like revenge of the dude bros. You've got these 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old guys with access to sensitive information. That definitely needs to be backstopped. So I'll be watching that one very closely.
Yeah, when you talk about Anschutz, they're talking about $74 million of potentially life-saving research could be nixed in all this. Sage.
Clearly, the Trump administration is going to basically take a very broad approach to hacking as much of government as they can. And with that, there's going to be collateral damage. There's 2 things I want people to keep in mind, though. Number one is we are at $36 trillion worth of debt. And the fact is that somebody has to do something so that we don't have to cut everything in the future. That doesn't mean that everything that Elon Musk and Doge is doing is correct or perfect or is going to actually be proved to be constitutional. The second thing I want people to keep in mind is that Donald Trump and his administration still work off the same exact currency as any other administration, and that's called political capital. And there is only so much that they can cut that people consider to be life-saving care, valid, grants and things where money needs to go before people start saying, wait a minute, I support you going after fraud and abuse. That wasn't fraud and abuse. And hopefully the things that people do like, we can actually validate them, we can actually defend them, and they will be refunded.
Okay. Alvina.
Well, when it comes to the debt, Republicans are again trying to get corporate welfare and do more corporate tax cuts, which would raise the debt ceiling up, is the budget that they propose. So when it comes to that issue, that's what I have to say. To the cuts, I do agree with Sage. There's going to be a point when his political and social capital comes back at him. My guess is he doesn't really care and he's going to do whatever he wants. It's all for the interest of his wallet and the wallet of his cronies. I think it's completely ineffective to have non-elected officials running our treasury, our treasury office, because how do you hold that person accountable? You know, Elon Musk was in Trump's office saying, well, we can't have a bureaucracy where there's people making decisions, and yet he's not elected and he's the one making decisions for our country. Those are super scary things, and I hope that the courts can stop it, but then how is the court going to enforce their decisions? I think that's another question that hasn't been answered, is if the courts disagree with Trump and say you can't do that, as with the funding freeze, he's still doing it. What's next?
What is next? Big question. In Colorado Springs, there has been another twist regarding the legalization of recreational marijuana. Voters said yes to it back in November. Then the city wanted to do a revote. A judge said no. And now it looks like there will be a new version of this repeal question coming towards voters this spring. Alton, our election expert, I will start with you.
There is so much to unpack there, but first of all, I always like to disclose my client relationship with One Chance to Grow Up, the community nonprofit that works in the space of keeping kids away from today's high-octane marijuana products. So, the issue of what voters do and do not understand has a very interesting history. So all the way from the State House, where legislation was run to make sure that people understand that yes means for and no means against. And then you get to Colorado Springs, where they're like, oh, maybe the voters weren't 100% sure what they're voting on as far as this issue. There's also economic arguments going on down there, because people are saying, okay, we already have a medical market, but if people are going to go recreational, they're going to go to, say Manitou, or they're going to go to Pueblo or somewhere like that. So once again, like we talked about in question one, now it's back in the kicking back and forth in the courts, and now we have to see if there will be yet another appeal.
Oh, yeah, okay. Sage.
So yeah, full disclosure for me as well, I did work on the Yes campaign to legalize recreational marijuana in Colorado Springs last year, and I have no doubt I will work on the campaign to preserve it coming up here soon. With that being said, I always keep my opinions on my own. Look, the way I see this is the voters spoke. They had an election. They said, we want this. And the city council, obviously leaning more conservative Republican, says, well, we don't like that, so we're going to try again. The problem is that, number one, that sets a terrible precedent for anything in the future. That anytime the voters speak, can the legislature or another city council just simply overturn it every single time? That's really not a great way to govern, first and foremost, whether or not it's constitutional. Secondly, I think that the city council is hoping that there's going to be reduced turnout in a special election, and that's why they're going to win this one, because, we're not going to have younger folks who would be more willing to do this, because we had, obviously, in a presidential year, you have a lot more turnout. Again, that's really not a great way to govern. The fact is that the majority of voters in an election with a high turnout said, we want this. We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, the courts have now ruled twice in, I think, a week. But it's unfortunate that the city council has decided to so quickly try to basically overturn the will of the people with an election that will have lower turnout.
Mm-hmm. Alvina.
I think the big picture thing to think about is the Democrats have a trifecta. They've been in charge for a while. And so Republicans have been trying to legislate and do things through the ballot. So what does this kind of precedent set? Are they testing the market to see if they can continue to do this if they vote, for example, on abortion measures and they want to take it to the courts and remove it or rephrase it, and then doing it in a non-popular election when people don't know what's going on? And unfortunately, because that's the only tool that they have right now, they're probably going to be leaning that. So I'm curious to see if this is a testing cycle for them. Are they going to test this out and see if they can do it for bigger initiatives down the road?
Okay, and Patty.
As long as we're doing disclosures, our paper has been called West Weed, Weed Word. We are the only company maybe in Colorado that doesn't do drug tests. So with that as background, It was Amendment 64 was pushed by people, not by Republicans back when marijuana was legalized in 2012. And many municipalities, you've still got the option, you can opt, you can make votes. Several municipalities in the metro area don't have marijuana. Denver obviously was an early adopter. Colorado Springs has always been a mess about this issue and has always really wanted to defy what the population in Colorado Springs wants. They've had no trouble with their medical marijuana stores. The problem in Colorado Springs has been people want access to other products, so they do go to Manitou Springs, they do go to Pueblo. It would be nice if the government just let Colorado Springs residents do what they want to do that is legal.
And just one other point on that is, remember, the right to referendum is in state law and it's in local law. So yes, it's, sounds like, well, government's overruling the will of the people, but the people also have a chance through petition processes to overturn local legislation that they don't like. So let's not just beat up on government on this one.
Okay, all right. Another long weekend is upon us, and that means a lot of people are hitting the roads again. And last week, a lot of attention has been placed on safety issues and the amount of accidents on our roads and what can be done to make our roads safer, we hope. Sage, I will start with you.
Yeah, roads have been, when I started working in the legislature back in, 2017, roads were a huge topic. Well, how can we put more money towards our roads and bridges? And unfortunately, I think that we're getting to a point now where especially municipalities and counties are saying, hey, we have to do something about this. Because unfortunately, roads and bridges they're not sexy. They're not the thing that captures people's attention and grabs headlines, because we all acknowledge it's an issue, but it's not something that people are throwing punches over necessarily, especially in our hyper-partisan environment we're in. I think that the legislature can only kick this can down the road for so long, especially with counties and municipalities stepping up to say, hey, something needs to be done. They do have a powerful voice in that capital. And so as this continues to rise to the top of their priority list, I think they're going to be a huge driver in getting things done. That being said, right now our state is cutting out of its budget, and so I don't think that JBC is going to be looking to prioritize it. I don't think the legislature is going to look to prioritize it this year, but it's not something that we can ignore for very much longer.
Okay, Alvina.
Well, we can't ignore it. It is in the headlines. It is sexy because Trump has said that he's going to cut federal funding for Colorado because of Colorado values, something that we're all proud about having. And so, unfortunately, it's become a partisan issue where we have a president who, doesn't like Colorado, and he's going to do everything he can to make it uncomfortable and unsafe for families in Colorado. And that's just the reality of our politics right now.
Mm-hmm. Just seeing the numbers, too, about how many accidents are happening in construction zones. I mean, there's personal responsibility that people are just rushing, or trucks aren't chaining up when the snowstorm is coming. Patty.
And AAA just put out a big study about how many pedestrian deaths there are, how unsafe the roads are. And there are two things to blame. One is the condition of the roads, and that is an issue we really have to take up at the legislature. And Alvina's right. I mean, we're not going to be seeing some of that federal funding, especially if it goes to people who are having a population boom, which Colorado is not right now. But it's not just the condition of the roads, it's also the condition of the drivers. I don't think we need to worry about people in Colorado Springs driving while high. I think we have to worry about the people who are still on their cell phones, despite the laws, who are driving so fast beyond transplants who don't understand the conditions. But a lot of it is just that distracted driving, and it's almost like the conversations people now have. They're not civil. Drivers aren't civil either. If you're on the roads now, they seem worse than they have ever been.
Mm-hmm. And to touch on what you two both said, a couple of weeks ago, the Department of Transportation said that they will prioritize projects in communities with high birth and marriage rates. And our state's fertility rate is currently among the lowest in the nation.
Yeah, and to the safety thing, and there's also a nomenclature issue here. So law enforcement and more of the media is starting to use the term crash instead of accident, because accident implies accident. Crash implies someone was doing some stupid stuff they weren't supposed to be doing behind the wheel. So to Patty's point, like for instance, remember we have a new law now where handheld cell phone use is supposed to be illegal, but it's a secondary offense. So how do you enforce that? After someone gets rear-ended, did you have your cell phone in your hand? No. You know, if you're going to have that kind of law, put some teeth behind it. And if you see someone and you see the top of their head while they're driving, pull them over, make that a primary offense. The other part is also, to Patty's point, unskilled drivers. And you also mentioned the, folks who don't chain up or the folks who don't have the proper tires going into the mountains. But also remember, we have a move over law. You are supposed to, if there is something going on the shoulder, tow truck, CDOT crew, whatever, you're supposed to move over. But if you can't move over, you're at least supposed to slow down. But I'm a cyclist. No one even knows how to give cyclists the 3-foot buffer that we're allowed by law when we're on the roads, because people in Colorado essentially don't know how to drive. And that's why we have the safety issues we have on the road.
Okay, thank you all. The last few weeks on this show, we've been talking a lot about civic leadership, and it feels as though a spotlight this past week has really been on a lot of our elected political leaders. So let's have a discussion about motivation, serving communities versus serving one's own interests. For all of you all, I want to ask you, is there a leader that stands out to you for standing up? And is there a leader whose motivation you question? I will start with you, Albina.
Yesterday, I saw our Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, speak. I think she'd be a great AG. She has the voice for it. She has the ability to do that. I think she's already been positioning herself as somebody that's going to push back on the Trump administration. So we think about that election coming up. I think she'd be a good role for that. Joe Neguse in Congress has been great. If we talk about the future of our state and who's going to lead it, I think he has great experience in Congress. He's already in leadership. He's passed 105 bills, whereas Lauren Boebert hasn't passed any bills. And whether I agree with her bills or not, she can't get anything across the finish line. So I don't know what she's doing there. I don't know what we're paying her for. But whatever it is, it's not helping anybody in Colorado.
Patty.
When we were talking about leadership the last few weeks, Daniel Ritchie, Dana Crawford, we have to remember they were not elected officials. These were people who took on causes they wanted to, using all their energy, in Daniel Ritchie's case, his fortune. So there still are a lot of people like that out there. But if we're talking about elected officials, Chantel Lewis, who is a Denver City Councilwoman, I have been really impressed by the stances she's taken. She communicates well with her constituency. On Monday night, she actually said, I don't want to pass this bill, this plan for some of the money for the homelessness. She's worked for the Colorado Coalition. I need more information. That's what our elected leaders should be asking for. Okay. Let's see, who did I mention, 2 months ago as our person to watch, and she's still one to watch, but I'm not sure I trust her motives, Danielle Jurinsky out in Aurora.
Okay.
Another councilwoman.
Really interesting article this past weekend, too, on the Denver Gazette, all on her. Okay, thank you.
And mine would be Senator James Coleman. He's not a big headline maker, but he is a true workhorse type who also works to build coalitions. And I've known him from around the community even before he became an elected leader. And I just think that he's got a very bright future also. And then on the flip side of that, his colleague, Senator Jaquez Lewis. I'm a former congressional staffer, and I understand that, it can be a bit of a pressure cooker. But these allegations of mistreatment of staff that have elevated all the way to requiring the Senate Ethics Committee to look into it is very concerning. And anytime you have even allegations of aides, whether at the congressional level, the local level, the city council level, being asked to perform tasks outside of the Capitol or City Hall or something, I think that really needs to be cracked down on.
Okay, and Sage.
So somebody that I got a chance to actually work for at the state capitol and I've gotten to watch is State Senator Barb Kirkmeyer of Weld County. In a state where Republicans really have no political power, Barb Kirkmeyer, who's a member of the Joint Budget Committee, the most powerful committee in the state legislature, is somebody who every single day is actually doing her job. And don't get me wrong, she's good going on camera too. She's a fantastic politician, but she is a hard worker. And she has had that mentality throughout her career, obviously serving as a Weld County commissioner, and was always fantastic to us as staff working there. And so just overall somebody I think that we need more of in politics. and somebody who just gets the job done. In regards to someone who I question the motives of, I was going to give a name, but I won't. I'm going to say Congress in general. I think the majority of members of Congress, generally speaking, are not there to do their job. Congress has for decades now ceded its authority to the presidency. Every single time a new president comes along, we all get scared because their power has continually increased. And Congress has failed completely to be the check and balance on the executive branch, because whoever's in power, oh, it's our president. We can't question our party's leader. And that lands us in situations where we have presidents that we're scared of. The fact of the matter is that presidents were never supposed to have this much power. And Congress not doing its job, members of Congress now not standing up to their own party leadership when they need to, regardless of who it is, whether it was Joe Biden or Donald Trump, I think is unfortunate. And I question the motives of the majority of them.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now let's go down the line and talk about some of the highs and the lows that occurred this week. Let's start on a low note with Patty.
Just because we have a convicted felon and former TV reality star in the White House does not mean the same kind of person has to be in power in Colorado politics. Jefferson County Republicans just elected Rich Wyatt, the former head of Gunsmoke Guns. He had his own TV reality show and then went to jail because of lying to the feds and tax evasion. He's now head of the Republican Party in Jeffco.
Okay.
My low is the inconsistency that we see in legislative journalism. I think we've gotten a little spoiled by our fellow panel mates like Jesse Paul and Marianne Goodland and the way they're able to take a deep dive, but they work for sort of niche publications where politics is a big priority. I know that the local TV stations are doing what they can, but there are so many nuances in the hundreds of bills that are floating, and because of the contraction in the world of journalism, the ability to take that long-form deep dive seems to be going away. So that would be my low.
That's good. Yeah.
So one thing that Elon Musk and Doge did bring up this last week that I thought was kind of fascinating, and I had to actually put on X and ask if it was real, is that when a federal employee is terminated, apparently the paperwork has to be brought down to a limestone mine in Pennsylvania with manila folders and boxes and done manually. And at first I thought there's just no way this is true. And so I put it up, and sure enough, I had a reporter say, look at this story from 10 years ago about the same exact thing. And apparently this has been something that's happening for decades, and everyone said, yeah, we got to fix that. Yeah, we got to fix that. And it's never happened. And it is completely true that when a federal employee is terminated, their retirement paperwork has to be brought down to a mine in Pennsylvania with hundreds of workers doing this manually, and so they're limited to how many workers they can process in a single. Anyways, if that is representative of even 1% of the federal government, that's not good. And so, regardless of what you think of Elon Musk and Doge, seeing that and seeing how many presidential administrations had ignored that and not fixed it, that's definitely a low.
Okay.
I would say the temperatures. Let's keep it real. These cold temperatures, they lock me in the house, and I'm not very social, so not loving the cold.
Me neither. Me neither. Patty, a high note.
It's going to be warmer this weekend, which makes it a good time to come down to 5 Points right outside this studio, which is having the Jazz Roots Festival, all kinds of entertainment on Saturday, and then it's going to repeat the following Saturday.
Okay. All right.
And I'm planning on being down for that. My high is the work that's being done at Colorado Uplift. I got a chance to go speak to their students. They're a nonprofit that works in the education space, and they try to cultivate leaders. They also try to work with kids from urban environments. The cohort that I talked to are probably 20 students present, but they probably represented, I'd say, almost a dozen schools between the Denver, Cherry Creek, and Aurora school districts. And it just gave me a big charge to say you can look out at our future and think that it's secure.
Thank you for sharing. That's great. Sage.
So this week we saw the return of Mark Fogel, an American who was imprisoned in Russia for possessing a small amount of marijuana when he traveled there and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He was brought home through the efforts of the Trump administration, so kudos where it belongs. And it was exciting to see pictures of him enjoying whether it was apple juice or whiskey, I don't know, on the airplane coming home. If it was me, it'd be Martinelli's, but for some, something a little stronger. But seeing that is, you put yourself in those situations for just a brief moment, and you just go, I cannot imagine the feeling where you think that you're going to be stuck there for so long, and then I finally get to go home. It was fantastic to see him brought back to American soil.
Yes, absolutely. And Alvina?
Going back to things that keep me humble, I am potty training a 3-year-old, so that's an adventure in itself, but having a 3-year-old is a gift that when the world's problems seem so big, I just stay focused on him.
Well, best of luck to him and you.
Yeah,
It takes
exactly.
a while. At least it did in my house. I shouldn't say that.
You could have brought him here, like Elon took to the White House.
Next time.
Next
time, okay? All right.
Another 3-year-old, I got one you could have too.
Yes. All right. My high is my gratitude for one of our co-workers. After 19 years and 4 months of literally running the show at PBS 12, this episode of Colorado Inside Out is the last one for our director, Steven Zinn. He is the one who says, take camera 1, take camera 2, that kind of stuff. He makes sure that the camera angle's just right, the lighting is perfect. Anything technical that goes into the broadcast of Colorado Inside Out, Steven is behind. He is the one who, if there's any kind of questions of what's broken, what's not working, he is our tech go-to. He is a jack of all trades and a leader whose commitment to excellence has what really has stood with me. Steven is going to leave us, but his family back in Tennessee and his parents are going to be so happy to see him back close. We wish you all the best, Steven. Thank you for everything you've done to making Colorado Inside Out just great, especially my last 2.5 years here. And thank you, Insiders, for joining us this week. We appreciate it. Thank you. We have a studio audience this week from North Glen and Thornton area. We appreciate you all. And for you all watching at home on your devices or listening to the podcast, we wish you a good week as well. And it's Valentine's weekend and a long weekend, so enjoy. And I will see you next week here on PBS 12.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.